Hello, it's Philip Taylor speaking from Richmond Green Chambers in London. This morning I'm looking at a very interesting book from INTERSENTIA Limited. They're an Antwerp-based firm. They have an office in Cambridge. This is the Antwerp Tax Academy, University of Antwerp joint publication called Building Trust in Taxation. Now you would think that's an oxymoron, wouldn't you? Trust and taxation, but it isn't, and it's an important book, this one. It's been edited by Bruno Peeters, Hans Gribnau and Joe Badisco. And as I say, it's available from INTERSENTIA. Elizabeth and I looked at the book. We had a long discussion about this book because it was an interesting one. And our book review title is Fair and Unfair Taxation, a plethora of international tax issues examined in this book, and that's what you're getting. Let's look at the book first of all. It's a hardback and it's got a dust sheet, so we'll look at that first of all. There's the front bit there. If you can make it out, there's the spine, and then there's a little bit of blurb on the back. It's difficult to read actually, probably in this light. Now there's not much on the back inside cover and not much on the front inside cover, so they haven't really used up their dust cover very much, but the book itself, that's the front without the dust cover on, so it looks quite impressive. It's an impressive book actually. Starting at the back, it runs to something approaching 376 pages. There's no index as such, but what you've got at the front is, apart from the front page itself, there's the front page there. You've then got all the information about the book itself, which is contained on that side, and then you've got, and that's all the detail, then you've got a very important preface, and the preface of course is always the giveaway because it gives a lot of information. That's written by the three editors of the book, and then you go into the content section as a whole, and it's split into various parts, in a total of 4 parts, and each part has a number of different sort of chapter subheadings, if you like. Now, this is the list of all the authors. Now, I've got a real problem here because I can't go through all the names of all of them, but there are a lot of people who've been involved in this book. So it's because it's edited and it's got all these contributions, you can see immediately that there's a wealth of knowledge which is coming to us from INTERSENTIA. Then there's an introduction from the 3 editors setting out what the book is all about. It started off as a position paper, and then going from the introduction, which is quite long, we get into the main work itself. And what we've got with the main work is, in part 1, it starts off with taxation, the state and society. What you have got is a useful little short index, as there's no index at the back, short index of what's actually contained in the actual part and the section, and the name of the person who's written it. Then there are various subheadings, and there are of course footnotes all the way through. As I say, the only thing that it doesn't have is an index at the back. Whether that's actually needed for this publication, I don't know. I doubt very much whether that's of that much help, because you should be able, through the contents section, to find what you're looking for in this book quite quickly. So what do we say about the book? Well, a couple of 100 years ago, the American statesman, diplomat, writer, scientist and inventor, Benjamin Franklin, opined rather amusingly, that there are only 2 things in life that are inevitable. Yes, death and taxes. And now his likeness graces the United States $100 bill. Whether he or his readers quite realised it or not, he could only be referring to systems of taxation that, for all their annoyances and flaws, are fundamentally fair and in which everybody is expected to pay taxes. Now, that's a subject which some people don't agree with, but the bottom line is that in any modern society, there has to be some sort of taxation system, and the issue then is should it be onerous, or too onerous, such as the sort of William Tell, Robin Hood type of onerousness, or should it be a relatively benign regime of taxation? Of course, the problem is such is not the case in many parts of the world, as this newly published title from INTERSENTIA dismally reminds us. Its 3 joint editors have produced a compilation of carefully researched articles from 24 expert contributors, including the editors themselves, which examine various aspects of mainly unfair taxation in the attempt to theorise possible solutions. The result of this endeavour ranged from the interesting to the startling. As I say, these results are quite important because taxation quite often can be the death knell, certainly in a liberal democracy, for the government in power. And of course I can remember the days of the 1960s when the Labour Party were in power in England and Britain, and we had very, very high levels of taxation indeed, quite unacceptably high levels of taxation, and I don't know that we will actually return this in terms of direct taxation. I don't know whether we will return to that in the future. I certainly hope not. Now, referring to the book's title, Building Trust in Taxation, which I made a slightly ironic remark about at the beginning, its contributors reveal that where there is no trust in a taxation system, there is little or no taxation, therefore few sources of finance for the public good, therefore bribery and corruption, which inevitably replace tax, therefore endemic and abject poverty. In any number of areas, corrupt practices supplant taxation, and it's been established not just by the UN but by various world onlookers that we do have a very corrupt society across the globe, and it's something that needs to be stamped out but hasn't, and of course taxation is one part of it. A phenomenon, and we think we can call it that, is studied in detail, particularly in the chapter written by Katharina Gangel, Eric Kirchler, Christian Lorenz and Benno Torgler on non-filers in a developing nation. Non-filers being those who don't pay taxes and don't file tax returns either. This is a serious matter, of course, which affects the economy of a nation and even such matters as public safety. There are a number of nations in this category, mainly developing countries, and the nation scrutinised as an example is Pakistan. It hasn't been singled out specially, but in fact it is a good example of where there are fairly substantial problems. Here, as the authors have apparently discovered via empirical evidence, only about 1% of the population file tax returns. That, frankly, I think is a very worrying state of affairs for any country. Tax avoidance and evasion is, to a much lesser extent, a problem in developing, or rather developed countries. Developing countries haven't really caught on with that yet, but the developed countries, it certainly can be a problem. Big corporations being the main culprits, engendering much resentment, which one hopes will lead to some sort of fiscal reform in the future. And of course, the matters such as Starbucks, Amazon and Google, for example, are discussed in the first chapter. And I'm not getting into the debate about who's paying what or anything else. The fact is there has been reported suggestions that they're not paying as much as they should do. Whether that's true or not, I don't know. But the fact of the matter is that they are looked at, and because they're very large organisations, and very successful ones to boot. The main thesis here, then, is that if taxpayers are confident that their tax system is fair, exemplifies good governance, and is free of corruption, the position then is they are far more willing, probably, to pay taxes. So do read this book, and I think you may be convinced that Adam Smith's dictum that taxation is liberty was correct. Let me conclude. Generally, the book's international contributors, and there are a large number of them, propose a number of solutions to unequal tax policies, which range from the practical to the almost utopian. One advocates pushing towards a multipolar world of autonomous regional blocs, which would presumably deconcentrate political power to create a multilateral democratic order in which individuals rather than oligarchies would have a greater say in the formation of tax policies. I think that's just a little bit fanciful personally, but you never know. In the future societies, we don't know what will happen. We are talking, of course, of the year 2017 when I record this, so hold your horses. Much thought backed by research actually is provided by this excellent book. on taxation in general and its underlying principles. It comes from it comes for use by policymakers to lawyers, readers from a wide range of backgrounds and professions, including accountants, and I'm sure they'll all find it a convincing and useful read. And as I said, the publication date is stated at 2017. There's the book again, there's the spine, and then there's the back. Just opening it in the middle: trust in tax systems, the problem of lobbying, the profile of political influence. An important one, because one of the reasons possibly why some larger firms are not paying as much as they should do is because they're very successful in knowing the system and lobbying about their own particular situation. And in fact, it talks about Apple here. I'm not making any comments about individual companies at all. It's not my place to do that. But what this book does is it is trying to give a comparative, in my view, from what I'm seeing of the book, it's trying to give a comparative and reasoned picture of where we are at the moment. I'd like to thank Bruno, Hans and Joe very much indeed, and of course Tom Shears at INTERSENTIA for sending the book to me and for keeping me informed of the excellent work which INTERSENTIA is doing. A big thanks to everybody, or thank you to everybody, and I'll look forward to seeing more books like this in future. This, by the way, is probably a money tree, but I don't want to get into that party political argument in 2017 about money trees, because I think we've gone far enough just with the taxation. Thank you to all anyway. Bye bye.